Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with the Magic Guide for Total War Warhammer 2. There are a few new lores of magic that have been added, and I'm sure there's plenty more to come, so let's get an early start, and let's keep in mind, some of these numbers are subject to change with patches, and any major changes will be covered in addendum videos. We start the only way I know how, with Skaven, specifically Skaven Spells of Plague. With 2 augments, 2 summons, a breath, a hex, and a vortex spell, the Skaven Spells of Plague are a pretty versatile set, allowing for some picking and choosing when it comes time to prepare for battle. The lore attribute, Plague Rash, is marked as an augment but acts as a hex, hitting all enemy units with negative 12% speed and negative 9% vigor no matter where they are on the battlefield as long as a spell is being cast. Seeing how fatigue can adversely affect melee stats and the Skaven Spells of Plague include a fair number of low-cost spells, it makes sense to take Plague Rash to the field, especially considering its low cost. Bless with Filth is a great augment spell that covers a 40-meter range of allied units with the ability to inflict poison damage for 10 seconds at a time, and the spell itself is active for 22 seconds. Only 5 wins to cast with a cooldown of 23 seconds, the duration of the spell doubles to 44 seconds if overcast for 8 wins. I have often pointed out the value of effectively using poison in battle for a multitude of reasons, and this spell, as such, is a solid one for reducing enemy effectiveness on the field. Poison reduces weapon and armor-piercing damage in melee and from range, and it also reduces speed. All of these by a significant degree of 20 to 24%. This means that Bless with Filth can be used not only to reduce the enemy's ability to hurt your troops, but also to reduce their chance of getting away when you have the upper hand. Bless with Filth has a short duration, and as such, you should try to cast it just before or just after lines are about to meet. Make sure you cast this as wide as possible. Get as many units affected with it, as multiple units hitting a single enemy unit with poison doesn't stack or make any additional difference. In my opinion, a must-have on the field. Pestilent Breath is a wind spell that costs 8 winds to cast, has a cooldown of 26 seconds, and can be overcast for 11 winds to add the infliction of poison damage to the spell. Causing no armor-piercing damage, overcast or not, the spell causes 20 points of damage, lasting 2 seconds. This can do a great deal of damage against slightly armored or unarmored units, and that opens up the option of scaring away enemy range support or dealing damage to unarmored melee units that are able to defend themselves by other means. Don't take this against typically armored foes, and certainly don't take this if you've already got a Plague Furnace. The mount adds Pestilent Breath as an ability that can be triggered every 45 seconds, and though it has about a third of the range for casting and it can't be overcast, it will likely do the trick considering the other benefits of being on a chariot. Vermintide is an interesting spell, being the first of the summon spells available in this lore. With 6 uses at a minimum of 41 seconds apart, you can spawn a unit of clan rats within 60 meters of the caster for just 5 winds of magic. This is a very valuable spell in the right context. On the one hand, a unit of clan rats can be summoned behind enemy lines to ambush archers or artillery and at least stop their fire until the enemy can respond. On the other, they can come up from behind the enemy and charge into their backs to cause additional morale damage. As a cheap spell with many tactical uses, Vermintide seems like a must-have spell on the battlefield, but its 41-second cooldown is a hard pill to swallow. I would say this is a good one to take if you expect a large number of ranged units on the other side of the field, or artillery, but I much prefer a different spell we'll discuss in just a moment. Wither is the first hex spell here with a cooldown of 37 seconds and a cost of 10 winds of magic. The spell drops armor by 30 for 50 seconds in a 40-meter range. Overcast, the cost climbs to 16 winds, but reduces armor by 60. There are some relatively obvious applications for this spell. Warriors of Chaos and Dwarfs will always come to the field with at least a few highly armored units. Use Wither to strip away the armor, at least in part or completely. Not only will this help your non-armor-piercing units cause damage to typically armored enemy units, but it will also help armor-piercing units as well, as a part of their damage dealt is non-armor-piercing as well. Make sure you prioritize targets. Focus on helping those non-armor-piercing units before you assist armor-piercing ones, and make sure you're targeting enemy units that will be most affected. Reducing enemy armor to 0 against a non-AP unit is a much bigger difference than reducing it to 20 in the same situation. It's quite the pricey spell, so I wouldn't take it to the field unless you're going very cheap with your units and avoiding AP units for the most part, or of course, if you're going up against those typically armored enemy forces. Plague is a vortex spell which costs 12 winds to cast, has a cooldown of 55 seconds, and sticks around for 20 seconds. Overcasting costs 18 winds and increases the amount of armor-piercing damage done. Like the best vortex spells, Plague stays in one spot and inflicts damage over time. Between its explosion, which doesn't seem to cause damage but definitely disrupts formations, and the 2 to 3 points of armor-piercing damage per tick, with no additional regular damage over 20 seconds, Plague can cause a lot of hurt to a clump of enemy units. But it's very expensive to cast, and almost cost-prohibitive to take to the field. If you are confident in your ability to force the enemy into a clump, take Plague to the field. If not, you're spending a lot of points and wins into a spell that might be very easily dodged. And finally, we have Pestilent Birth. With a range of 60 meters, 2 maximum uses, a minimum of 53 seconds apart, and a cost of 12 wins, this brings a unit of Plague Monks to the field from beneath the ground. Plague Monks are a solid unit, frenzy, anti-infantry, and 15% physical resistance. While this spell is expensive to take to the field, I find it extremely valuable when I expect to be up against an infantry-heavy army. Whether used in melee for rear charges that causes that extra morale damage, or to chase off enemy range support, the Plague Monks will just do better than the clan rats of Vermintide against infantry. I'm not likely to take this if I suspect a Kroxagor or Dino heavy army, for example, but in most cases, I like to keep it on hand to bolster faltering lines, tip the balance over when needed, or devastate an enemy position on the field. The dreaded 13th spell is a character-specific spell that comes with either set of Skaven spells. With 2 uses, a cost of 25 wins, and a cooldown of 52 seconds, this spell brings with it a massive explosion and calls forth a unit of Storm Vermin with halberds. Storm Vermin with halberds themselves are a decent unit, but it's the 48 points of detonation damage and the 12 points of armor-piercing damage, both per tick, that's really impressive here. In a clump of enemy units, that can do a lot of work. Just make sure to use it on a clump, because just getting a unit of Storm Vermin with halberds and wasting the potential damage that comes with spending 25 winds of magic would be a massive error. Unfortunately, the explosion doesn't seem as effective against large enemy units, which is where the halberds would be at home, so you might want to cast the explosive bit on infantry and then lead the unit itself into cavalry or frontline large units. When up against the Skaven Spells of Plague, a big part of it is being prepared to micromanage counterspells and movements. If you see Plague coming, try to get out of its way. Pestilent Breath is a little harder to dodge, but try not to provide the opportunity for its use. When the enemy is using Wither, try to use spells of your own to either boost your own melee defense or armor, or alternatively, to reduce enemy melee attack so they only land a minimal number of hits against your weakened units. Finally, since Wither only works when a unit is within its area of effect, there is always the option of pulling away from its cast radius. Units caught in a poisoned state should be buffed with added weapon damage, or in the case of characters that need to get away, Foe Seeker can come in handy. When it comes to Vermintide or Pestilent Birth, the best you can do is try to react as soon as you see it cast. Swarming the units as they rise from the ground can take care of them instantaneously, but apart from that, be ready to pull archers away, or to just turn a frontline unit around to prevent that rear charge and the morale damage that comes with it. And that covers the Skaven Spells of Plague, a lore that can debuff the enemy directly or indirectly, bringing down their ability to defend themselves, their ability to fight, or their sheer will to fight. There are many clever ways to use this lore on the field, and there's nothing like spreading a little bit of pestilence here and there. The lores of magic are just another set of tools on the battlefield. You need to make sure you take the right tools for the job and use them well. That's what being a great general is about. As always, for more Total War content, including updates to this Magic Guide mini-series, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Have any interesting magic-related thoughts or strategies of your own? Let me know in the comments below.